Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. India is the president of the United Nations Security Council this month, and this is one of the first things that India has done as president, give it a platform to Afghanistan to raise its concerns and to tell the world how things stand. The Afghan representative spoke. He slammed Pakistan. This is not a civil war, he said. This is a terrorized and criminal war. 40 civilians associated with the government were killed in Spinboldak, 27 civilians killed in Ghazni, attacks in Helmand. The Taliban have shot dead the head of the Afghan government's media information center. The Taliban have captured the first provincial capital, the city of Zaranj. The list is long, and as the world debates what must be done, the Taliban is beginning to strike Afghanistan's minorities. Tonight we'll show you what happened at a Gurdwara and the message that is being sent out to the Hindus and Sikhs in Afghanistan. If the world doesn't act swiftly, there will be nothing left to win. We'll bring you a ground report from Afghanistan. Also on the show tonight, yet another Hindu temple destroyed by a mob in Pakistan. Now paramilitary has been deployed in the area to ensure peace. In West Asia, tensions rise with the oath-taking of Raisi, the new president of Iran. There's rocket fire between Lebanon and Israel. The Americans are making their moves against China, from providing safe havens to the people of Hong Kong to selling arms to Taiwan. And India's women's hockey team fails to win a medal, but for 1.3 billion Indians, they're winners. We'll tell you why. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
India and China agreed to disengage in eastern Ladakh's GURDWARA region, says the Indian Army, restoring the line of actual control in the region. This is a crucial breakthrough in talks after nearly 15 months of a face-off. The Taliban captured an Afghan provincial capital and killed the government's top media officer in Kabul. This as the United Nations Security Council, under the presidency of India, holds a briefing to discuss the situation in Afghanistan. Rebels from Ethiopia's conflicted Tigray region take control of the town of Lalibela, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Fighting has now spread into neighboring Amhara and Afar regions as residents flee the rebel advance. Healthcare company Johnson & Johnson has applied for emergency use authorization in India for its single-dose COVID jab through a collaboration with India's Biological E Limited. Two Belarus coaches who cut short sprinter Kristina Tismanouskaya's stint at the Tokyo Games have been removed from the athletes' village. The Belarusian sprinter has now gained asylum in Poland. The United States has recorded more than 100,000 COVID cases in a single day, its biggest daily jump in 6 months.
Governor, Department of Health, what are you waiting for? It is time, Governor, to issue an emergency order.
Experts blame the more contagious Delta variant for the surge. Venezuela says it will make a 1,000,000-to-1 change in its currency, eliminating 6 zeros from prices as hyperinflation continues to wreak havoc on the economy. The change will go into effect from the 1st of October. A raging wildfire in the U.S. state of California has ravaged a tiny historic town dating back to the state's gold rush era. The Dixie Fire raged through Greenville, destroying centuries-old structures. Australian women's hockey team has narrowly missed out on a maiden Olympic medal after going down 4-3 to Great Britain in a thrilling bronze medal playoff. The unfancied Indians fought back from 2 goals down to lead 3-2 at one stage, but Rio 2016 champions Great Britain scored in the third and fourth quarters to come away with a tight win and a place on the podium. Italy have been crowned Olympic champions in the men's 4x100 meter relay for the very first time. It had been 17 years since the Azzurri had even been on the podium in this event. But the team of Lorenzo Pazza, individual 100 meter champion Lamont Marcel Jacobs, Ese Osa de Salu and anchorman Filippo Tortu produced a sensational display to edge Great Britain to the gold in a photo finish. Canada won the bronze.
Afghanistan is going the Syria way, and if this continues, there might be nothing left to win. Very strong statements. This is what was said at the United Nations Security Council that discussed Afghanistan today. On the ground, we are tracking the evolving situation with my colleague Anas Malik, who's sending us daily ground reports. Look at what we have.
I'm standing in Kabul's PD5 in Khushal Khan area and the Khushal Khan market, and there was a rocket attack just a while back. There were 2 rockets that were fired in this area that is right opposite to the Marshal Fahim Police Academy. These mountains are taken as a cover by the extremist terror outfits because they come down from the mountains. They attack the security forces. They try to overrun the territories through these mountains. Panjshir, the name literally translates into 5 lines. It is the home to Ahmad Shah Massoud, who is commonly known as the Lion of Panjshir. This highway is known as the Khost Kabul Highway. It connects Khost, the province of Khost, to Kabul. I'm standing right outside the Bagram Air Base. This is the outer wall to the airbase. Beyond this, another 2.5 kilometers inside is where all the operations used to take place. The province of Maidan Wardak has come repeatedly under attacks of the Taliban for the fact of its close proximity to the capital city of Kabul. It's located about 30 miles southwest of Kabul. Anas Malik in Lakhwan, Afghanistan for WION World is One.
And as we track Afghanistan, here's a question. Who is the Taliban? A terrorist group supported by Pakistan, a terrorist group legitimized by America, and a terrorist group made up of Afghans. Those who defend them say they've changed, they've evolved. It's Taliban 2.0, we're told. Those who track their actions would tell you that nothing has changed. The Taliban are taking territory by force. They're forcing women to not leave their homes alone. They're forcing girls to quit school, forcing girls to get married to terrorists, forcing men to grow beards and join their ranks. The Taliban is not even pretending to be evolved. They're back to their old ways, now targeting religious minorities. This week, the Taliban dislodged the Nishan Sahib from a Gurdwara. This is a historic Gurdwara we are talking about in the Paktia province. The Nishan Sahib is a religious flag that signifies Sikh religious identity and pride. These pictures are from the Thala Shri Guru Nanak Sahib Gurdwara. The flag was taken down from here. Reports say the Taliban forced the caretaker of the Gurdwara to remove the flag. It was later tied to a tree so that it cannot be viewed from a distance. This is a message to all Sikhs in Afghanistan. This Gurdwara is of great significance to them. It is believed that Guru Nanak, the founder of the Sikh religion, visited this place of worship once. It was looked after by a local community of Sikhs and Hindus. And now this area has fallen to the Taliban, and the Sikhs and Hindus fear for their lives. Because this act, the taking down of the flag, is a message for all of them. The Taliban will not accept any religion other than Islam in Afghanistan. This is what a campaign of ethnic cleansing looks like. A campaign that they began in the 1990s. They wiped out religious minorities in this country, and now they're at it again. Look at these numbers. There was a time when Sikhs and Hindus formed a sizable chunk of the Afghan population almost 4 decades ago in the 1980s. There were 220,000 of them, 220,000. By the 1990s, their number fell to barely 15,000. That's a drop of more than 90%. Who was behind this? The Taliban. They singled out Hindus and Sikhs. They forced them to wear identity badges. This was in 2001. Taking inspiration from Hitler, we are told, the Taliban made Hindus wear a yellow patch on their clothes, much like the yellow Star of David that Jews were asked to wear during the Nazi rule in Germany, so that they can be identified easily. In the same year, the Taliban blew up the Bamia Buddhas. What for? Because they wanted to demonstrate their hatred towards idol worshippers. These were ancient carvings among the tallest Buddha statues in the world. By blowing them up, the Taliban was also sending a message to the Hindus. Idol worship is common among Hindus, so this was a message for them. Following these events, most Hindus and Sikhs left the country. As of today, there are barely 700 of them in Afghanistan. Reports say around 650 Sikhs and nearly 50 Hindus left. The world has largely forgotten about them. Their options are limited. If they must live in Afghanistan, they have to choose between their faith and their life, or choose to fight the Taliban. Like these women from Herat. They have picked up guns to support the Afghan forces. These women have joined the war against the Taliban. Why are we telling their stories to you? Because these are the people of Afghanistan standing up for their identity, for their rights and their freedoms. As world powers play politics over their future, these people have chosen to fight back. What are world powers doing in the meantime? Holding conferences, deliberating after making a complete mess of the situation. Today, the Afghan government briefed the United Nations Security Council, and India enabled this discussion in its capacity as the president of the UNSC. So Afghanistan's envoy spoke, and he said that his country was heading for a catastrophe. He said that the Taliban has launched a barbaric offensive that has led to unprecedented deaths, and that they're trying to turn Afghanistan into a haven for transnational terrorism. He also called out Pakistan for supporting terrorists. He showed evidence of Pakistani war machines and terrorists aiding the Taliban in its offensive.
Importantly, the Taliban continue to enjoy a safe haven in and supply and logistic line extended to their war machine from Pakistan. Graphic reports and video of Taliban fighters congregating close to the Durand line to enter Afghanistan, fundraising events, transfer of dead bodies for mass burial, and treatment of injured Taliban in Pakistani hospitals are emerging and are widely available. This is not only a naked violation of the 1988 UN Security Council sanction regime, but also leads to further erosion of trust and confidence towards establishing a collaborative relationship with Pakistan to end the war in Afghanistan. Consistent with the agreement of the leadership of Afghanistan and Pakistan in Tashkent last month, we urge Pakistan to help with removing and dismantling of Taliban sanctuaries and supply line and establish with us a joint monitoring and verification mechanism to make the fight against terrorism and international effort for peace effective and credible.
Does the world have the political will to stop Afghanistan's descent into complete chaos? Or will they keep justifying the Taliban, legitimizing them by bringing them to the talking table, making them a part of discussions? The window for action is shrinking by the day. And when we talk about Afghanistan, when we hear Afghanistan, we think war. We think of a country that one would never dream of visiting, let alone living in. But that's not the real Afghanistan. Before the Taliban arrived, this was an open society. Religions lived in harmony in this country. Minorities thrived economically and politically. All of that changed in the 1990s. The Taliban destroyed Afghanistan's social fabric. They hunted minorities and erased their culture. Here's a report on their worst crimes.
Afghanistan's history reads like a war book of imperial ambitions, military blunders, and spirited resistance. But buried below the blood and debris is a different Afghanistan, one that dotted the fabled Silk Route and hosted the 60s hippie trail, It was a melting pot of cultures where religions met and free thought prospered. Then came the Taliban. Under their intolerant rule, Afghanistan suffocated. Minorities were hunted down and killed. Their religious sites were demolished. All in the name of Islamist fundamentalism. One of the worst episodes came in 1998. Frenzied Taliban terrorists captured the city of Mazar-e-Sharif. But the victory wasn't enough. The Sunni Taliban wanted to punish the Shiite Hazara residents of the city. They went from house to house. All able-bodied Hazara men were dragged out and killed, sometimes in front of their families. Later investigations show at least 2,000 people were killed. It was a sign of things to come. The Taliban would go on to kill 15,000 Hazaras, mostly in northern and central Afghanistan. Mass graves in these regions attest to the massacre. In 20 years, nothing has changed. Even today, Taliban terrorists target Hazara neighborhoods. Life was equally precarious for non-Muslims. Hindus, for example, had to wear a yellow badge for identification. Hindu women had to wear headscarves. Such violations forced the community to flee Afghanistan. Their numbers dropped from 220,000 in the 1980s to a few hundred today. The Taliban's vision of Afghanistan was binary. You were either a devout Sunni or an evil infidel. They had their own yardsticks to measure infidelity. One of them was idol worship. Across Afghanistan, you can spot faceless deities and headless Buddhas, all destroyed mercilessly by the Taliban. Their ban on idolatry turned into a cultural genocide. The hatred and intolerance peaked in the spring of 2001. For centuries, the Buddhas of Bamiyan had towered over this valley. They had survived invasions and rebellions, but they could not escape the fateful gaze of the Taliban. On March 2nd in 2001, Taliban terrorists arrived at the site with bombs and rocket launchers. For several days, they trained their guns on these statues. When the dust settled, 2 centuries of Buddhist history had been pulverized. A gaping hole remained where the statues once stood. The Taliban thrives on such graphic destruction. It is the only way they can unsettle the Afghan people. Today, that eerie feeling has returned. Shia Muslims fear they will be targeted again, that their men will be executed and their women sold as slaves. Nothing about the Taliban's actions suggests that they have changed. If anything, they are back with a vengeance. The Afghan minorities realize this. Many of them are mobilizing for the battle ahead. They are fighting for Afghanistan's multicultural soul. Because the Taliban may destroy cultural landmarks, but they cannot destroy memories. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
On Thursday, India marked 2 years since the abrogation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan was giving sermons to New Delhi. The Prime Minister put out a Twitter thread accusing India of human rights violations, oppressing minorities, destroying Kashmir's identity. Pakistani ministers held a rally. They marched on the streets of Islamabad, preaching India about secularism and minority rights. In the meantime, here's what was happening in their backyard. On the 4th of August, a temple was desecrated in Pakistan. Sacred idols of Hindu gods were smashed. Religious posters were burnt in broad daylight, and the entire incident was telecast live on Facebook without any intervention from the police or local authorities. The shameful incident took place in the Bhong village of Rahim Yar Khan district in Pakistan's Punjab province, which for the record is barely 60 kilometers away from the border with India. Eyewitness videos show a Muslim mob storming the temple, setting fire to the main door and ransacking the structure with sticks, stones, bricks and rods. Why did they do this? The justification is appalling. They say their attack was in retaliation to the actions of an 8-year-old Hindu boy who was arrested last week for allegedly desecrating a Muslim seminary in the area, 8 years old. The boy was released on bail for being a minor. But the locals in the area were not satisfied with the punishment, so a group of adult males desecrated a temple over the alleged actions of an 8-year-old. I mean, who does that? Even now, the situation is so tense that Pakistan has deployed troops in the area. Look at these images. These are paramilitary forces outside the temple in anticipation of another violent attack by locals, who continue to blame the boy for the unrest.
तकरीबन 8 साल 4 माह का बच्चा था, उसकी नाजेबा हरकत की वजह से यहाँ बहुत सारे मामलात पेश है और यहाँ पे दंगा फसाद भी हुआ। सीपैक को भी आवाम ने जो है वहाँ पे एहतजाज किया, बंद कर दिया गया। लेकिन हमारे रेंजर, पंजाब रेंजर ने और हमारे पंजाब पुलिस के जवानों ने बेहतरीन हिकमत अमली की और यहाँ पर उन्होंने बहुत सारे निज़ाम को बेहतर किया।
Back in India, the government has lodged a strong protest with Pakistan. India summoned Pakistan's top diplomat in New Delhi and expressed concern over the continued attacks on minorities in that country, because this is not a one-off incident. Attacks on minorities and their places of worship have been taking place at an alarming rate in Pakistan. In January 2020, a mob vandalized a temple in Pakistan's Sindh province. They also set fire to Hindu scriptures. In July 2020, an under-construction temple was vandalized in Islamabad. A mob of vandals razed down the temple's walls, demanding the construction be stopped. In August 2020, a pre-partition temple was demolished in Pakistan's Leari. The temple was reduced to a pile of bricks by locals on the 16th of August, just a day after India's Independence Day. Then in October 2020, a temple was vandalized in Pakistan's Sindh province. They damaged idols and desecrated the shrine. Islamabad promised swift action, but the attacks did not stop. Barely 2 months later, in December 2020, hundreds of Pakistani extremists burnt and demolished a temple in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. They razed it down with hammers and crude weapons. A case was filed. All accused were later acquitted. Why? Because the Hindu community had quote-unquote pardoned the mob. In March this year, a 100-year-old temple in Rawalpindi was attacked by a group of vandals ahead of a planned operation to clean the area of all encroachments. And now a temple has been desecrated in Punjab. That makes it a total of 7 incidents in 2 years. And they preach others about tolerance and secularism. According to Anila Gulzar, a Pakistani activist for minority rights, there were a total of 428 temples in Pakistan's Sindh province. Today, only 20 of them are left. 20 out of more than 400. According to another report, out of the 365 Hindu temples in Pakistan, only 13 are managed by a government body, the Evacuee Trust Property Board. What about the rest? The Hindu community in Pakistan is responsible for the rest. Well, how well equipped are they to manage these temples? You can judge that from the repeated attacks on their places of worship. They're in no position to fight back. This is the story of minorities in Pakistan, a story of grief, oppression and helplessness. Imran Khan would do well to remember this story the next time he decides to preach anyone, let alone India, about secularism. Regime changes can go 2 ways. It can either reverse old policies or double down on them. In Iran, it is clear which way the regime is going. No more half measures, no more stop-start diplomacy. Iran's new president means business. But what does that mean for West Asia? A lot of uncertainty and instability. For starters, Iran's regional allies are emboldened, or should I say proxies, the likes of Hezbollah and the Houthis. For them, Ibrahim Raisi's presidency is a triumph. The Hezbollah chief described the new president as a shield against Israel. They may soon need that shield, because the Israel-Lebanon border is flaring up. It all started on Wednesday. Rockets from southern Lebanon hit open targets in Israel. Nobody claimed the attack. But southern Lebanon is a Hezbollah stronghold. So Israel retaliated. For the first time in 7 years, they launched an airstrike on Lebanon, the Israelis. The Israeli military says that they hit Hezbollah launch sites. But the Lebanese president disagrees. He says the rockets hit Lebanese villages and was a clear indication of aggressive intent. So how did Lebanon respond? Well, the government did not, but the Hezbollah did. They fired a dozen rockets at the Sheba Farms district. Now, this is a disputed territory, but Israel has controlled it since 1981. For the Hezbollah, this is a major escalation. They haven't openly claimed an attack on Israel since 2019. Clearly, they're emboldened. The question is, what is their source of confidence? A big factor is the new ally in Tehran. Ebrahim Raisi is a protege of the supreme leader. His election was less about democracy, more about fate. Let me tell you why. Iran's Islamic Revolution is nearly 42 years old. A lot has changed in this time. For instance, how do you describe modern-day Iran? An Islamic democracy or a managed theocracy? The fact is, the Islamic Revolution is losing steam. The so-called Iranian model is not working. So what does Tehran do? Revive the spirit of the Islamic Republic. And Ebrahim Raisi is the perfect man for this job. He was a foot soldier of the revolution. He has the Ayatollah's confidence. And he's a victim of Western sanctions. But don't expect Raisi to change Iran's fortunes, because those are factors that are beyond his control. But foreign relations, that's where Raisi will stamp his authority. Take his swearing in, for instance. Both Hamas and Hezbollah sent their delegates. Hamas was represented by its chief, Ismail Haniyeh. Hezbollah sent their second-in-command, Naim Qasim. Both groups would have attended irrespective of who was being sworn in, but they're clearly ecstatic about Raisi. Hamas urged the new president to strengthen Iran's commitment to the Palestinian cause. The Islamic Jihad from Gaza also congratulated him. Remember, these are not just Iranian proxies. For most of the world, these are terrorists. And right now, both groups have their guns trained on Israel. So what's the mood in Tel Aviv? Raisi's election was definitely a blow for Israel. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett called him a hangman. Now, don't get me wrong. Israel-Iran relations were always hopeless, totally unsalvageable. But this new regime will embolden proxies, which means more border flare-ups, more saber-rattling, more instability. In fact, the entire Arab world is apprehensive of Raisi. He has ruled out meeting US President Joe Biden. He says Iran's missile program is non-negotiable, but he presides over a failing economy and a restive population. That's a recipe for political disaster. What's happening at the Israel-Lebanon border could just be a sneak peek. The United Nations says the situation is very dangerous. It could spiral out of control in days. We've already seen that happen in Gaza. The problem here is the lack of restraint. There are new regimes in Iran and Israel, but the policies have not changed. And if anything, both sides are more emboldened. Last week, an Israeli ship was attacked off the coast of Oman. Israel blames Iran for the strike. Now we have Iranian proxies attacking Israel and Israel responding in kind. Clearly, regime change has not worked. The new leaders have come with a renewed appetite, not for peace, but for war. Meanwhile, tensions between the US and China are growing once again. The Biden administration seems to have moved from rhetoric to action. In the last 24 hours, it has made 3 significant moves. First of all, American intelligence agencies are said to have accessed massive genetic data from China's Wuhan laboratory. And they're going through this data, we're told, to find the origin of the pandemic and to possibly try to link it to Wuhan. Second, the Biden administration has announced that it's going to provide a temporary safe haven to Hong Kong residents living on American soil. And then America has approved its first arms sale to Taiwan. A $750 million proposal has been made to sell state-of-the-art weapons to the island nation. Our next report gets you all the details.
The undeclared Cold War between America and China is escalating. From rhetoric, it is shifting to action. The Biden administration is making the first moves.
But overall, COVID-19.
America is going to provide temporary safe haven to Hong Kong residents currently living on its soil. This move will allow them to extend their stay in America. For how long? In a signed memo to the Department of Homeland Security, President Joe Biden has proposed to allow them to stay for up to 18 months, citing compelling foreign policy reasons.
Our announcement today is in response to the PRC and Hong Kong authorities' repeated actions to undermine rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Basic Law and the Sino Joint Declaration, which is a binding international agreement. We strongly urge Beijing and Hong Kong authorities to cease their continued attacks on Hong Kongers for exercising protected rights and freedoms.
The move does not offer a pathway to citizenship, but it can be renewed indefinitely by the US president. Nonetheless, Hong Kongers living in America are moved. There are thousands of them who would now be eligible to remain and avoid being deported. Maggie Shum is one among the thousands.
I'm happy tears. It's like I read it, I was like, wait, let me read it again. And then, I think it's just like, because there's a lot of, pressure and stress building up in terms of, about all this uncertainty, right? And then so this just sort of like opened the floodgates and, just sort of like crying happy tears and talking to my friends and just feeling like, it's a good feeling.
Naturally, the move has infuriated China. The Chinese Foreign Ministry is calling it a plot to stir up trouble in the city, which is bound to fail. China has also warned America of severe countermeasures, but Washington is only pushing further.
In the world, we stand together.
On Thursday, the Biden administration approved its first arms sale to Taiwan to help the democratic island nation modernize its defenses against growing Chinese threats. The proposal is worth $750 million. It includes the sale of 40 self-propelled howitzers, 20 artillery support vehicles, 5 Hercules vehicles, 5 M2 Chrysler mount machine guns, and 1,700 kits of GPS-guided munitions. All these weapons will be manufactured by BAE Systems, a British multinational arms company. The US State Department has notified the Congress about this proposal, saying it would serve America's national economic and security interests. The Congress now has 30 days to renew it. China's reaction? Beijing calls it a violation of its sovereignty. From Hong Kong to Taiwan, America has made 2 big diplomatic moves in 24 hours. Will China retaliate with more than words? We are tracking updates. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Stop now so we can get started.
Every crisis has a face. The big villain who we pin the blame on. For the climate crisis, that big villain was carbon dioxide. Every scientist was talking about it. Every politician was blaming it. We were told, cut down CO2 or prepare for the worst. Turns out, there's an even bigger baddie. It's called methane. Until now, it was a sidekick. The world's first priority was cutting down CO2. Methane could wait. But now scientists have issued a new warning. If we don't act swiftly on methane, global warming will be uncontrollable, we are told. This is the new threat assessment by the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They say methane is playing an even greater role in overheating the planet. And I know what you're thinking. Why did scientists not flag this before? Surely they did not discover methane now. It's been around forever. Well, one of the scientists described it perfectly. Climate action, he said, is not a sprint. It's a marathon. You must be ready for the long haul, which means there will be new obstacles, new theories, and new strategies. Let's talk a bit about this new theory on methane. Some basics first. Where does methane come from? Some of it is released during oil and gas extraction, especially in poorly managed wells. The other big source is animal farming, specifically the beef industry. Cows generate methane in 2 ways, through digestion and through their waste. The process is extremely complicated, but here's the gist of it. Cows have certain bacteria in their stomach. They help in digesting food, and during this process, they create gases such as carbon dioxide and methane. Now, this gas has to be released. Guess how do cows do that? Just like humans, by burping it out. This may sound like a trivial process. How can cow burps cause climate change? But remember, we're talking about millions of cows. Put together, that's a lot of burps and a lot of methane. In fact, 40% of total methane emissions come from agriculture, 40% in the world. So that's how animal farming creates methane. But why is it more dangerous than carbon dioxide? Two reasons. Number one, its warming potential is 80% more than CO2. And number two, it remains in the atmosphere for shorter periods, around 10 years. So in the short run, we have to cut down methane. That's the only way we can keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, 1.5. How do we do that? Is changing our food habits the only option? Well, some countries are certainly thinking that way. In Spain, for example, there's a heated debate over meat. The consumption minister asked Spaniards to cut down. He said it was important to protect the planet. You can imagine what happened next. People asked him to stay off their plate. His prime minister disowned him, saying nothing beats a ribeye steak. There was a similar attempt in France. The mayor of Lyon removed meat from school canteen menus. The kids were used to beef and chicken. They were now staring at green vegetables and beans. Do you know what happened next? Farmers went on tractor marches. They brought goats and cattle to protests. The agriculture minister said it was absurd to stop serving meat. Don't put ideologies on the plate. That was his response, quote unquote. But is this really about ideology? We often say climate change is indisputable. We ridicule politicians who deny it. What's different in this case? Some of the climate champions are the worst offenders. Case in point, New Zealand. Their emissions have reached a new record. New Zealand's dairy industry releases more than 17,000 kilotons of greenhouse gases. And the trajectory is not any better. So what we need is radical change. Remember, when electric cars first arrived, we called them toys. Today, an electric car company is the most valuable in the world. Same needs to happen with our diet. And this isn't some fringe climate theory anymore. Eating meat causes climate change. There are no two ways about it. But we can't legislate diet. Just like we did not legislate electric cars, the change must be organic. It must be a conscious decision by consumers. I know this is an awkward question. Have you booked her a spa for Sunday yet? Well, if you haven't, you may want to. It's Cat Day on the 8th of August, a day to pamper your dear furry friends, shower them with their favorite treats, maybe flood Instagram with their photos, play the favorite game. It's actually about all you can do, because 5 minutes into the pampering, your cat may be bored and might want to walk away or stare at you with a poker face. Come to think of it, whoever came up with a whole day dedicated to cats forgot that these felines hate too much attention. Cats like their space. How did we ever manage to get them indoor? Cats were first domesticated in 7,500 BC. This was in ancient Egypt. Bastet, the Egyptian goddess of love, had the head of a cat. Cats were revered by ancient Egyptians. If you killed a cat in Egypt back then, you could be killed too. Greeks and Romans used cats for pest control. In Asia, cats were the symbol of wealth. Every rich and well-to-do family had one. Some had two. But around the Middle Ages, cats were demonized in Europe. They were associated with witches and the devil, even blamed for the Black Deaths of 1348. As years passed, cats once again found their way back into our homes, also found their way back to ships. Cats were put in charge of fighting rodents on board cargo ships. Who can dare to give a cat so much task today? They have become the ultimate divas. Have you seen cat pages on Instagram? Many have more than 1 million followers. They're minting money now. And how? Let me show you one of them. This is Nala, the leader of the Instagram pack. 4.3 million followers. Even her own brand of cat food merchandise, a Guinness World Record for her follower count, and that is her crown. Nala was adopted from a shelter home. She recently celebrated her 11th birthday. Here's another Instagram celebrity, the famous Grumpy Cat. She left the world in 2019, but lives on as the grumpiest cat ever. Grumpy's Instagram follower count is 2 million plus. Next we have Little Bulb. She has 2.3 million followers. Don't go by this cat's size. She's a real powerhouse. Bub appears in YouTube videos. She is a published author, activist, even raises money for cats in need. Who knows? Maybe she'll run for office one day. Meet Hamilton, the hipster cat. His mustache has made Hamilton an internet sensation. He was recently found complaining about a bad haircut. And finally, you have Smoothie, the self-declared queen of fluff. She's royal in every way. Smoothie judges shows, gives her verdict on pop culture, and is sometimes found plotting and playing with her best friend called Milkshake. You know, we've been watching cat videos long before Instagram came into the picture. How can we forget Tom? He's the ultimate fictional cat. Tom shot to fame in the 1940s, barely said a word, and turned out to be quite an unusual cat. Even after all the chasing, taunting, and taking revenge, Tom never really tried to eat Jerry. Another fictional favorite is Garfield, the protagonist of his namesake comic strip. Garfield is a lazy and cynical Persian cat. He loves his lasagna, pizzas, and sleeping, and hates Mondays and exercise. Come to think of it, Garfield is more human than cat. In fact, most cats are. Just like humans, cats too like their space, they like cleanliness, they're protective, very independent. Maybe that's why they make such good pets, especially to those of us who are not home all day. It's always nice to go back home to a cat. Also comforting to know that she will be safe while you are at office. At worst, she will stray, but come back home by the end of the day. Do you know that Russia has the most number of house cats? 59% of Russians have cats. So do 43% of Americans, 42% of Argentinians, 40% Italians, 18% Indians. If you happen to be among these 18%, then you may want to hurry up. Start planning your cat's special day, and don't forget to write to us and tell us how your plans went. I think that's a good note to end on. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.